Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Foundation of Sand. Jack Brennan stood at the edge of the veranda, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of amber and gold. A man of calculated, he'd built a successful architecture firm from nothing over 15 years. The rugged landscape before him, with its natural balance of strength and beauty, reminded him of what had drawn him to design in the first place. The expansive vacation home they'd rented for the family reunion belonged to his father-in-law, Warren Blackwood, a man who'd made his fortune in luxury real estate and never let anyone forget it. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice belonged to Marlene, his wife of 7 years. She slipped beside him, champagne flute in hand. Once a passionate artist who'd captivated him with her free spirit and creative fire, she'd gradually transformed since their marriage. Her artistic dreams abandoned for a position at her father's company, her independent streak replaced by an increasing deference to her family's opinions. "It is," Jack said, noticing how rarely they shared quiet moments anymore. "Reminds me of that trip to Glacier National Park before we were married. Remember that cabin?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That tiny place? God, we've come a long way since then." The moment shattered as Warren's booming voice called from inside. "Marlene, come see what Douglas brought us from Paris." Douglas Pierce, Warren's right-hand man at Blackwood Luxury Properties, and the golden boy who could do no wrong. Jack had never trusted the man's too-perfect smile or the way his eyes lingered on Marlene during family gatherings. "Coming, Daddy." Marlene's entire demeanor changed, shoulders straightening, voice lifting to a higher pitch. She downed her champagne and hurried inside without a backward glance. Jack sighed and followed. The sprawling vacation home was filled with Blackwood family members and business associates, all orbiting around Warren like planets around sun. In a corner, Jack's parents, Rita and Frank Brennan, sat awkwardly on an expensive sofa, looking out of place among the wealthy crowd. Former school teachers who'd raised Jack with values of hard work and integrity. They'd never meshed with the Blackwood family's ostentatious displays of wealth. "Jack," his mother waved him over. "Your father was just saying he'd love to see those new blueprints you're working on." "The Henderson project?" Jack smiled, grateful for the familiar territory. "It's a sustainable design, uses about 40% less energy than comparable buildings." "Sustainable." Warren's voice boomed as he approached, tumbler of scotch in hand. "That hippie nonsense doesn't sell premium properties, son. Luxury is what people want. Gold fixtures, marble countertops. Not solar panels." He laughed, several guests joining in sycophantically. Actually, Jack kept his voice level. Eco-friendly designs are commanding top dollar in today's market. The Henderson project sold for. "Douglas closed the Westlake deal yesterday," Warren interrupted, clapping the younger man on the shoulder as he joined them. "Biggest commission in company history." "Congratulations," Jack said flatly. Douglas's smile was practiced perfection, just following the Blackwood philosophy, go big or go home. His eyes drifted to Marlene as she approached with fresh drinks. Something in their brief exchange of glances made Jack's stomach tighten. "Speaking of philosophy," Warren continued, "when are you going to stop playing with your little firm and come work for a real company? I've got clients who'd pay double what those eco-warriors are giving you." Before Jack could respond, Warren's wife Vivian called everyone to dinner. The massive dining table gleamed with crystal and silver, Warren taking his place at the head like a king holding court. "Beautiful table, Vivian," Rita Brennan said kindly. "Thank you." Vivian barely acknowledged her. "Our housekeeper spent hours arranging it. I simply can't stand anything less than perfection." Dinner proceeded with Warren dominating conversation, business deals, political connections, and thinly veiled reminders of his generosity in hosting everyone. Jack noticed Douglas continually engaging Marlene in whispered side conversations that made her laugh softly. "Remember our trip to Maui, Douglas?" Warren reminisced. "When you negotiated that beachfront property right out from under the Japanese investors." "How could I forget?" Douglas raised his glass. The look on their faces alone was worth the price. That's what separates winners from losers, Warren declared, knowing when to strike without mercy. His eyes flicked to Jack with undisguised disdain. After dinner, they moved to the vast living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. Warren showcased his latest purchases, an antique pocket watch, a limited edition bourbon, custom-made Italian shoes he claimed cost more than most people's monthly salary. Handcrafted by third-generation artisans, Warren explained, displaying the leather shoes with their distinctive red soles. Only 50 pairs made each year. Jack excused himself to use the restroom, needing a moment away from Warren's endless self-aggrandizement. In the hallway, he overheard voices from a partially open door. Marlene and Douglas, speaking in hushed tones. "You're taking too many risks," Marlene whispered. "Jack almost walked in on us yesterday." "Let him," Douglas replied. "Your father would destroy his career with one phone call if he tried anything. Just be patient. Once everything's in place." Jack stepped back, heart hammering. He'd suspected something, but hearing it confirmed sent ice through his veins. Before he could process what he'd heard, his phone rang, a client with an emergency at a construction site. He took the call, mind racing with implications of what he discovered. Returning to the living room, he found Marlene sitting suspiciously close to Douglas, while Warren continued extolling the virtues of his precious shoes. "Jack, darling," Marlene called too brightly, "come join us." Douglas was telling us about his sailing trip through the Greek islands. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation, while Jack's mind cataloged every interaction between his wife and Douglas. The sidelong glances, the casual touches, the inside jokes. How had he been so blind? Chapter 2. The Breaking Point. Morning brought no clarity. Jack woke early and went for a run, pushing himself harder than usual as he sorted through his thoughts. When he returned, the house was stirring with activity. Warren had planned a hike to a scenic viewpoint, followed by lunch at an exclusive mountain restaurant only accessible by private road. Marlene approached as he drank his coffee on the patio. "You disappeared early. Everything okay?" "Just clearing my head," Jack replied, studying her face for signs of guilt. "How did you sleep?" "Fine." Her eyes shifted away too quickly. "Dad wants everyone ready to leave in 30 minutes. He's arranged for guides and everything." "Of course he has." Jack couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Marlene frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. I'll be ready." The hiking party assembled on time, Warren leading the way in expensive outdoor gear that looked like it had never seen dirt. Douglas stood beside Marlene, both dressed in coordinating outfits that looked more appropriate for a sporting goods catalog than an actual hike. "The guide says it's about 2 hours up and 1 back," Warren announced. "Spectacular views at the summit. I've arranged for champagne and hors d'oeuvres at the viewpoint." Jack's parents opted to stay behind, Frank's knee acting up from old football injuries. "You go ahead, son," his father said quietly. "Your mother and I will enjoy the peace and quiet." The trail started easily enough, switching back and forth along the mountainside. Despite himself, Jack found the natural beauty calming. Ancient pines, wildflowers in surprising places, occasional glimpses of distant peaks through the trees. He hiked alone, deliberately falling behind the main group, where Warren loudly lectured everyone on local geology despite clearly knowing nothing about it. Ahead, he watched Marlene and Douglas hiking side by side, heads bent in conversation. Once, when they thought no one was looking, Douglas's hand brushed against Marlene's, lingering longer than could be accidental. By the time they reached the summit, Jack's mood had darkened like the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The view was undeniably spectacular, a panorama of mountains, valleys, and the silver ribbon of a river winding below. A guide was already setting up a portable table with champagne and food, no expense spared for Warren's display of affluence in the wilderness. "Worth every step," Warren proclaimed, popping the champagne with a theatrical flourish. "Nothing but the best for my family and friends." Everyone gathered around, oohing and awing appropriately. Jack stood apart, watching how naturally Douglas fit into this scene, playing the devoted son Warren had always wanted. "Jack," You look like someone stole your favorite toy, Warren called out. Come have some champagne. Might loosen you up for once. I'm fine, Jack replied, just taking in the view. The view from the top is always better when you've earned it, Douglas added with a pointed smile. Some people never make it this high. The double meaning wasn't lost on Jack. The group spent nearly an hour at the summit before Warren announced it was time to head down for their lunch reservation. The descent began easily enough, but the changing weather had made the trail slick in places. Warren walked ahead with Douglas, discussing some investment opportunity with animated gestures. Jack found himself behind Marlene, watching her careful steps down a particularly steep section. The trail narrowed between two large boulders, forcing them to proceed single file onto a muddy patch. What happened next occurred in mere seconds. Jack slipped slightly on the wet ground, instinctively reaching out to steady himself. His hand knocked against Warren, who was navigating the narrow passage, causing the older man to step into a muddy puddle with his precious Italian shoes. Warren spun around, face contorting with rage. You clumsy idiot, he shouted. Look what you've done. It was an accident, Jack said, regaining his balance. I slipped on them. The slap came without warning, Warren's open palm connecting with Jack's cheek with surprising force for a man his age. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. How dare you touch my shoes, you disgusting man? Warren shouted, his face red with fury. They're worth more than you. Clean my shoes and get lost. Jack stood frozen, the sting on his cheek nothing compared to the shock coursing through him. The entire hiking party had stopped, staring at the confrontation in uncomfortable silence. Douglas made no attempt to hide his smirk. Dad, Marlene finally spoke, but not with the outrage Jack expected. Instead, her voice carried embarrassment and deference. Jack, apologize to him right now. The words hit harder than the slap. Jack looked at his wife, the woman who'd once promised to stand by him through anything, now siding with her father after he'd been physically assaulted. Apologize? Jack repeated, voice dangerously quiet. For an accident? Just do it, Marlene hissed. You know how much those shoes mean to him. Jack looked from his wife to Warren to the mud-splattered shoes, supposedly worth more than his dignity. Something cold and hard crystallized in his chest. I think I've apologized enough in this family, he said finally. Without another word, he turned and continued down the mountain alone, ignoring Marlene's calls behind him. At the trailhead, he borrowed one of the guide's phones to call a taxi, leaving a brief note for his parents explaining he'd been called away on urgent business. 3 hours later, he was on a flight home, the humiliation still burning but gradually transforming into something else, a calm, focused resolve that would have frightened anyone who knew him well. Chapter 3: The Awakening. The empty house greeted Jack with blessed silence. For 3 days, he moved through its rooms like a ghost, ignoring Marlene's increasingly angry calls and messages. She and her family would be returning in 2 days, expecting explanations and apologies. They would receive neither. On the third morning, Jack drove to his firm's office downtown. His business partner and oldest friend, Nora Chun, looked up in surprise when he entered. Thought you were still in Montana, she said, taking in his expression. What happened? Jack closed her office door and told her everything. The humiliation, Marlene's betrayal, the affair with Douglas. Nora listened without interruption, her sharp features hardening as the story unfolded. That explains the calls, she said when he finished. Warren Blackwood's office has been trying to reach you through the firm. Said it was about a potential collaboration. No collaboration. No reconciliation. No second chances, Jack said with quiet certainty. I'm filing for divorce. Jack. Nora's expression softened. Take some time to think. 7 years of marriage. I've been thinking for 20 hours on planes and in this empty house, he replied. What would you do if someone slapped you in front of everyone you know, then demanded you clean their shoes? Nora's answer was immediate. I'd make them regret it. Exactly. Jack placed a flash drive on her desk. I need your help with something else. This contains the last 5 years of my personal financial records. I need to know what rights Marlene has to my firm, my designs, my patents. And I need to know how to protect all of it. You think she'll come after your work? I think Warren will use every connection he has to destroy me when I refuse to crawl back begging forgiveness. I need to be ready. Nora nodded, no questions asked. As the daughter of immigrants who'd built a successful restaurant business only to lose it through a predatory contract, she understood the need for protection all too well. I'll have answers by tomorrow, she promised. What else do you need? Information, Jack said. Everything you can find on Douglas Pierce and his relationship with the Blackwood family. Business connections, property holdings, possible vulnerabilities. Jack, Nora's voice carried a warning. Don't do anything you can't come back from. I won't. His expression remained unreadable. But they pushed me down a mountain. Now we'll see how they handle the fall. That afternoon, Jack drove to his parents' modest suburban home. They'd returned early from Montana after his abrupt departure, concerned about what had happened. He hit you. His father's weathered face flushed with anger when Jack finished explaining. And Marlene took his side? She did. Jack accepted the coffee his mother handed him. I'm filing for divorce. Rita Brennan sighed heavily. I never wanted to say it, but that family was poisoning you both from the beginning. The way they looked down on us, on your work. We should have said something sooner, Frank added. But you seemed happy, and we didn't want to interfere. It's not your fault, Jack assured them. But I need to ask you something important. When the divorce becomes public, Warren might try to hurt me by going after the people I care about. That includes you. What are you planning, son? Frank's eyes narrowed with concern. Nothing illegal. Nothing that crosses any moral lines I can't live with, Jack promised. But I won't let them humiliate me and walk away unscathed. His parents exchanged looks, the silent communication of a couple who'd built their lives on mutual respect. We taught you right from wrong, Frank said finally. We trust you to remember the difference. And we taught you to stand up for yourself, Rita added firmly. Whatever happens, we're on your side. Jack returned home and spent the evening reviewing old files, emails, and photographs from his years with Marlene. In a folder rarely accessed, he found what he'd been searching for, evidence of a project from 4 years ago when he designed an eco-friendly resort for a client who later sold the property to Blackwood Luxury Properties. The design had mysteriously appeared in modified form in one of Warren's developments 6 months later. Jack had suspected theft of his intellectual property, but couldn't prove it at the time. Now, with fresh eyes and motivation, he began connecting dots previously overlooked. Names on contracts, shell companies, suspicious timing of transactions. Each discovery fed the cold determination growing inside him. His phone rang. Marlene again. This time, he answered. Where are you? She demanded immediately. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was explaining your disappearance to everyone? More embarrassing than watching your father slap your husband and demand he clean his shoes? Jack's voice remained perfectly controlled. You're overreacting. You know how Dad gets when his things are damaged. And you know Douglas Pierce intimately, don't you, Marlene? The silence on the other end confirmed everything. Jack, I don't know what you think you heard. We'll talk when you get home, he interrupted. All the cards on the table. No more pretending. He ended the call and continued working late into the night, building a foundation for what was to come. When exhaustion finally claimed him, Jack slept soundly for the first time since Montana. The sleep of a man who had found his purpose. Chapter 4. Opening Moves. Marlene returned home alone 2 days later, wheeling her designer luggage into the foyer with the practiced efficiency of a frequent traveler. Jack watched from the living room doorway as she looked around, finally noticing the changes, missing photographs, rearranged furniture, and emptiness that signaled transition. What's going on? She dropped her purse on the entry table. Where are all our photos? In storage, Jack replied calmly. Along with anything else I thought you might want to take. Marlene's carefully maintained composure slipped. Take? What are you talking about? Sit down, Marlene. We need to talk. She followed him into the living room, perching on the edge of the sofa. Jack remained standing, maintaining the psychological advantage. If you're still upset about Dad, this isn't about your father, Jack interrupted, though his actions were the final confirmation of what I've suspected for months, which is that our marriage is a sham, that you've been sleeping with Douglas Pierce, that you and your family have never respected me or what I've built. Marlene's face cycled through shock denial, and finally a cold calculation that reminded him too much of Warren. "You can't prove anything about Douglas," she said finally. "I don't need to prove it in a court, Marlene. We both know it's true." Jack placed a manila folder on the coffee table between them. "These are divorce papers. My lawyer will contact yours tomorrow. I'm offering a clean break. You keep what you brought into the marriage. I keep what I built." Just like that? 7 years thrown away over one argument. It wasn't one argument. It was the moment you showed me exactly where I stand in your family's hierarchy. Jack maintained eye contact, his voice steady, somewhere below a pair of Italian shoes. Marlene's expression hardened, the mask of the dutiful wife vanishing completely. "Dad was right about you. No ambition, no understanding of what real power looks like. Maybe, or maybe I just define success differently." "You'll regret this," she said, rising to her feet. "When Dad finds out." "He already knows," Jack interrupted. "I called him this morning." This genuinely surprised her. "You what?" "We had a very illuminating conversation. He explained that my position in this family has always been conditional. That true Blackwoods know how to fall in line." Jack smiled without warmth. "I explained that Brennans know how to stand their ground." "What else did you say to him?" Marlene's voice held the first note of uncertainty. "That's between your father and me. But I think you'll find he's surprisingly amenable to a quiet, civilized divorce." It wasn't exactly a lie. The conversation with Warren had indeed occurred, though Jack had omitted mentioning that he'd recorded it, capturing Warren's threats, his admissions about interfering in Jack's business relationships, and several casually incriminating comments about tax arrangements that would interest federal authorities. "I don't believe you," Marlene said, but her confident facade was cracking. "Call him." She did, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. Jack could still hear her voice rising in disbelief, then anger, then a kind of pleading that told him Warren hadn't offered the unconditional support she expected. When she returned, her expression had shifted to something calculating. "Fine. You want a divorce? We'll get a divorce. But don't expect it to be as simple as you think. I've contributed to this household, to your career, by sleeping with your father's right-hand man." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That contribution I could have done without." "You self-righteous bastard," Marlene hissed. "You think you're so morally superior. Let's see how superior you feel when you're starting over with nothing." "I started with nothing once before," Jack replied calmly. "The difference is, this time I know exactly who my enemies are." Marlene left that evening, taking only a suitcase of essentials and the keys to her separate car. Jack changed the house locks immediately after she drove away, then called Nora. "It's done," he said when she answered. "She's moved out. How's our other project coming?" "Better than expected," Nora replied. "You need to see this in person. How soon can you get to the office?" An hour later, Jack stood in Nora's office, examining the documents spread across her conference table. "Douglas Pierce isn't just Warren's employee," Nora explained, pointing to a complex chart of business connections. "He's been systematically inserted into key positions throughout Blackwood's companies. The interesting part is his real estate license was suspended for 6 months 3 years ago for ethical violations in another state, a fact conveniently absent from his Blackwood company bio. Meaning he was operating without proper credentials when he closed some of these deals?" Jack studied the timeline. "Exactly. And there's more." Nora slid another folder forward. "That resort design you mentioned? I found patent application documents filed by Blackwood Properties that mirror your original work, filed just 2 weeks after you showed the designs to Marlene." Jack felt a surge of cold satisfaction. "Can you give me a meeting with Terrence Hamilton?" Nora raised an eyebrow. "The real estate commissioner? That might take some doing. Use my connection with his daughter. I redesigned their family home last year. He owes me a favor." As the weeks passed, Jack moved. He sold their shared house, reinvesting the proceeds in a smaller property solely in his name. He restructured his firm to protect it from potential litigation. He maintained a low profile, avoiding the social circles where he might encounter the Blackwood family or their numerous allies. Meanwhile, Marlene's initial quiet exit transformed into increasingly hostile legal maneuvers. Her attorney, a shark from Warren's preferred law firm, filed motions demanding half of Jack's business assets, claiming she had been an integral consultant on his major projects. Jack had anticipated this. When the court ordered the financial discovery process, he was ready with 5 years of meticulously documented work records showing Marlene had contributed exactly 0 hours to his firm's projects. Her name appeared on no design documents, no client meetings, no internal communications. "They're getting desperate," Nora observed after a particularly aggressive hearing. "Warren must have expected you to crumble immediately." "People like Warren mistake kindness for weakness," Jack replied. "They're used to others backing down." "What's our next move?" Jack checked his watch. "I have a lunch meeting with Commissioner Hamilton. Let's see if our theory about Douglas Pierce's licensing issues holds water." The meeting exceeded Jack's expectations. Hamilton, a no-nonsense public servant with a reputation for integrity, listened carefully to Jack's concerns about potential licensing violations at Blackwood Properties. "I can't promise anything based on personal connections," Hamilton warned. "But if what you're suggesting is true, it warrants investigation. Bring me documentation, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people." "I'll have it to you by tomorrow," Jack promised. That evening, as Jack compiled the evidence for Hamilton, his doorbell rang. Standing on his porch was Vivian Blackwood, Warren's wife and Marlene's mother. "May I come in?" she asked, her usual imperious manner subdued. Jack hesitated, then stepped aside. Briefly, Vivian settled on his sofa, looking uncomfortably out of place in his deliberately modest new home. "I won't waste time with pleasantries. What do you want to end this vendetta against my family?" "Vendetta?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "I'm simply protecting what's mine while pursuing a divorce your daughter initiated by her actions." "Don't play innocent," Vivian snapped. "The Real Estate Commission's investigation, the tax audit Warren's suddenly facing. You're behind it all. Name your price." Jack studied her carefully. "There is no price, Vivian. I'm not looking for a payoff." "Everyone has a price," she insisted. "Is it the Henderson Project?" "Warren can make those environmental approvals disappear overnight. That would be illegal. Don't be naive. This is how the world works." Her perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. "Warren will destroy you if you continue this." "He already tried," Jack replied evenly. "Tell him I said hello." After she left, Jack called Nora. "Vivian just paid me a visit. They know about the commission investigation." "That was fast." Nora sounded worried. "Watch your back, Jack. These people don't play fair." "Neither do I. Not anymore." Chapter 5. Countermoves. The Real Estate Commission's investigation into Douglas Pierce's licensing irregularities became public knowledge the following week. Local business publications ran the story. A rising star at Blackwood Properties facing scrutiny over potentially unauthorized transactions worth millions. Jack was reviewing preliminary drawings for a new project when his office door burst open. Douglas Pierce stood in the doorway, face flushed with rage. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Douglas snarled. "Digging through ancient history to find technical violations?" Jack calmly set down his pencil. "This is private property. You weren't invited." "Drop the investigation," Douglas demanded, advancing toward the desk. "Whatever vendetta you're pursuing against me, because Marlene chose the better man." "Better man?" Jack couldn't help but laugh. "Is that what you tell yourself? That she chose you? Not that you were a convenient tool in Warren's attempt to control his daughter's life." Douglas's expression flickered with uncertainty before hardening again. "You know nothing about our relationship." "I know enough." Jack stood, matching Douglas's height. "I know you've been operating without proper licensing. I know you've been involved in misappropriating intellectual property. And I know Warren will throw you to the wolves the moment you become a liability." "You're making powerful enemies," Douglas warned. "Warren has connections you can't even imagine. And yet here you are, doing his dirty work while he keeps his hands clean." Jack moved around the desk. "Ask yourself, Douglas, when this all comes crashing down, who will Warren protect? His daughter's lover, or his own reputation?" For a moment, Douglas seemed genuinely shaken. Then his arrogance reasserted itself. "This isn't over. We're just getting started," Jack replied, holding the door open pointedly. After Douglas left, Jack called his attorney to report the confrontation, then returned to his work with renewed focus. The preliminary moves were in place. Now, it was time to accelerate. That evening, Jack met with Roger Tompkins, a veteran investigative journalist who'd been covering real estate development in the city for decades. They sat in a quiet corner of a downtown bar, rarely frequented by the Blackwood social circle. Interesting timing, Tompkins commented, nursing a scotch. I've been trying to get solid information on Blackwood's operations for years. Suddenly, I get an anonymous tip about licensing irregularities, followed by your call offering an exclusive interview. Coincidences happen, Jack replied neutrally. Sure they do. Tompkins wasn't buying it. What's your angle, Brennan? Divorce proceedings getting messy. This isn't about my divorce, Jack said. It's about business practices that hurt legitimate competitors and consumers. The Real Estate Commission is already investigating Douglas Pierce. I'm just filling in some background. Over the next hour, Jack laid out evidence of Blackwood Properties' pattern of acquiring designs from smaller firms, then reproducing them with minimal changes. He provided documentation of his own intellectual property being used without attribution or compensation. He explained how Warren Blackwood's empire had been built not on innovation, but on absorption and intimidation. Most of this isn't technically illegal, Tompkins observed. Unethical, sure, but keep digging, Jack suggested. The licensing issue is just the thread. Pull on it hard enough, and you might find the whole sweater unravels. Why now? Why you? The journalist studied him carefully. You had to know marrying into that family meant playing by their rules. Maybe I believed people could change, Jack said after a moment. Or maybe I didn't understand the rules until recently. The article appeared 3 days later. A seemingly balanced profile of Blackwood Properties that nonetheless raised uncomfortable questions about business practices, licensing compliance, and the fine line between aggressive acquisition and predatory behavior. Douglas Pierce featured prominently. His rapid rise through company ranks contrasted with his previous licensing suspension. The response was immediate. Warren called Jack directly for the first time since Montana. "You ungrateful little shit," he snarled without preamble. "After everything I've done for you." "Done for me?" Jack kept his voice level. "Like what exactly? Belittling my business? Insulting my parents? Slapping me in front of my wife when I accidentally touched your precious shoes?" One incident blown completely out of proportion, Warren dismissed. "Men of our position have disagreements. You're supposed to handle them with dignity, not run to the press with ancient history." "I didn't mention the slap to anyone," Jack pointed out. "Interesting that you immediately connected that to the article." Warren's voice lowered dangerously. "Listen carefully. You have 24 hours to issue a public statement retracting your accusations and apologizing for the misunderstanding. Otherwise, I will personally ensure that your firm never receives another major contract in this state." "That sounds like blacklisting," Jack observed, "which, as I'm sure your lawyers have mentioned, is illegal under state and federal law. Don't lecture me about." "No, you listen," Jack interrupted, his calm finally breaking. "You created this situation. You raised your daughter to believe status matters more than integrity. You welcomed a man like Douglas into your business despite knowing his history. You chose to respond to a simple accident with physical violence and demanded I clean your shoes like a servant." "It was a moment of anger," Warren protested, his bluster fading slightly. "It was a revelation," Jack corrected, "of who you are, who Marlene has become, and what your family really stands for." "I'm not retracting anything, Warren. The truth is the truth." After ending the call, Jack forwarded the recording to his attorney with instructions to keep it secure unless needed. Then he called Nora. "Warren's rattled," he reported. "The commissioner's investigation must be finding something substantial." "That's not all," Nora replied. "I just got off the phone with Sophie Valdez." Sophie was a former employee of Blackwood Properties who'd left under unclear circumstances 2 years earlier. Jack had reached out to her weeks ago, hoping she might provide insight into the company's internal operations. "She's ready to talk," Nora continued. "Not just about Douglas's licensing issues, about systematic fraud in property valuations, manipulated environmental impact reports, bribes to planning officials. She has documentation, Jack." For the first time since Montana, Jack felt a flicker of genuine surprise. Why now? Why didn't she come forward before? Blackwood had her sign an NDA with a massive penalty clause. She was scared. Nora paused. The commission investigation changed things. She says if there's already an official inquiry, her information becomes whistleblower testimony, protected legally. Is she willing to go on the record with Tompkins? Under certain conditions, yes. Jack sat back, mind racing with implications. Set it up. And Nora, make sure she has good legal representation before she says anything publicly. Warren won't take this lying down. The next phase unfolded faster than Jack anticipated. Sophie Valdez's revelations, carefully vetted and documented, expanded the commission's investigation beyond Douglas Pierce to Blackwood Properties' broader practices. Tompkins published a follow-up article that sent shockwaves through the real estate community. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings hit a critical juncture. Marlene's attorney abruptly shifted strategy, dropping demands for Jack's business assets in favor of a quick settlement. The timing wasn't coincidental. Warren needed to distance his daughter from mounting scrutiny of Blackwood Properties. Jack received the revised settlement offer at his office. As he reviewed the surprisingly reasonable terms, his intercom buzzed. "Jack," his assistant's voice sounded strained. "Marlene Blackwood is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." He hesitated, then made a decision. "Send her in." Marlene entered looking nothing like the polished, confident woman who'd left their home weeks earlier. Strain showed in the shadows under her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. "This has gone far enough," she said without greeting. "Sign the settlement. End this war before it destroys everything." "Hello to you too, Marlene." Jack gestured to a chair, which she ignored. "Don't play games," she snapped. "You've made your point. You're not the pushover Dad thought you were. Congratulations. Now stop before people get hurt." "People already got hurt," Jack reminded her. "Your father made his choices. Douglas made his. You made yours." "It wasn't what you think with Douglas," she said, her composure cracking slightly. "It was complicated." "No, it really wasn't." Jack kept his voice even. "You chose status over loyalty. You chose your father's approval over standing by your husband when he was physically assaulted. Those aren't complicated choices, Marlene. They're revealing ones." She stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. "I never thought you'd fight like this." The Jack I knew was reasonable, compromising. "The Jack you knew thought he was part of family, not a corporate hierarchy," he corrected. "As for the settlement, my attorney will review it and respond accordingly." "Dad's under investigation by the IRS now," she said, changing tactics. "Did you know that? They're questioning transactions going back 5 years. His health isn't good, Jack. The stress could kill him." Warren made his own bed. Jack replied without sympathy. "I'm not responsible for the consequences of his actions." "What happened to you?" Marlene asked, genuine bewilderment in her voice. "When did you become so cold?" "I'm not cold," Jack said quietly. "I'm just finished pretending. Finished accepting disrespect as the price of belonging to your family. Finished watching people like your father and Douglas build empires by stepping on others." "You won't win this," she warned, moving toward the door. "Dad always comes out on top." "We'll see." After she left, Jack stared at the settlement papers. The terms were surprisingly favorable, a clean break with minimal financial entanglement. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt hollow, wondering if the man he'd been before Montana would recognize the man he'd become. Chapter 6: The Precipice. 3 months after the Montana incident, Jack's carefully orchestrated plan approached its culmination. The Real Estate Commission's investigation had expanded into a joint inquiry with the State Attorney General's office, focusing on potential fraud in Blackwood Properties dealings. Douglas Pierce's license had been formally suspended pending the outcome. Sophie Valdez's testimony had opened doors to other former employees coming forward with similar accounts of questionable practices. Warren Blackwood, once untouchable, found himself fighting battles on multiple fronts: legal, financial, and public relations. His company stock had dropped nearly 30%. Major clients were quietly distancing themselves. The empire built on intimidation and connections was showing its first serious cracks. Jack had maintained a deliberately low profile throughout, never commenting publicly on the investigations or his divorce proceedings. His firm continued to secure new projects, smaller than before, but innovative, sustainable designs that were beginning to attract national attention. On a crisp autumn morning, Jack arrived at his office to find Commissioner Hamilton waiting with Nora. "This is an unexpected visit," Jack observed, shaking the commissioner's hand. "An unofficial one," Hamilton clarified. "What I'm about to share isn't public knowledge yet." They settled in Jack's conference room, Hamilton declining coffee. "The Attorney General is preparing to file formal charges against Blackwood Properties next week. Fraud, licensing violations, falsification of documents, attempted bribery of planning officials. It's a substantial list." Jack absorbed this quietly. Against the company or individuals? Both. Warren Blackwood, Douglas Pierce, and 3 other executives are named specifically. Hamilton studied Jack's expression. "You don't seem surprised." "I've suspected the extent of the problems for some time," Jack admitted. "Which brings me to the purpose of my visit." Hamilton leaned forward. "There's significant evidence that Warren Blackwood personally directed the misappropriation of your intellectual property, specifically the lakeside resort designs. The AG wants to include those charges, but they need your formal testimony." Jack exchanged glances with Nora, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I'm not interested in personal revenge," he told Hamilton carefully. "My goal was always to expose unethical business practices that hurt consumers and legitimate competitors." "This isn't about revenge," Hamilton countered. "It's about accountability. Without your testimony, one of the most serious charges may not stick." "I'll need to think about it," Jack said finally. "This has already gone further than I initially intended." After Hamilton left, Nora closed the office door. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? Blackwood held accountable." "Yes," Jack admitted. "But criminal charges, possible jail time, that's beyond what I envisioned when this started." "They made their choices," Nora reminded him, echoing his own words to Marlene. "Warren didn't hesitate to threaten your livelihood, your reputation. Why protect him now?" Before Jack could respond, his phone rang, an unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Jack Brennan." The voice belonged to a woman he didn't recognize. "This is Nurse Reyes at Memorial Hospital. You're listed as an emergency contact for Frank Brennan." Jack's blood ran cold. "My father? What happened?" "He was brought in an hour ago after a car accident. He's stable, but I'm on my way." The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of anxiety. Jack found his mother in the waiting room, her face pale with worry. "The doctor says he'll be okay," Rita assured him before he could ask. "Broken ribs, concussion, some internal bruising. They're keeping him overnight for observation." "How did it happen?" "He was driving home from the hardware store," Rita explained, her voice shaking slightly. "A car ran a red light, hit him on the driver's side. The police said the other driver claimed his brakes failed." Something in her tone made Jack look closer. "You don't believe it was an accident?" The officer mentioned the other driver works for a property management company. Rita met his eyes. "Blackwood Properties." Jack sat heavily in the waiting room chair, cold realization washing over him. "This is my fault. I pushed too hard, and now they're coming after the people I care about." "Don't you dare take that on," Rita said firmly. "If Warren Blackwood is behind this, and we don't know that he is, then it's his crime, not yours." "I need to see Dad." Frank was awake but groggy from pain medication, his normally robust frame looking diminished against the hospital bed. Bandages covered the left side of his face, and monitoring equipment beeped softly in the background. "There he is," Frank managed a weak smile. "Your mother's been fussing over me, like it's a paper cut. How are you feeling?" Jack took his father's hand carefully. "Like I got hit by a car," Frank joked weakly. "Which is appropriate, considering." Jack swallowed hard. "Dad, I think this might be connected to my situation with Warren Blackwood. I figured as much when I saw the company logo on the kid's uniform." Frank's grip tightened slightly. "Listen to me, Jack. If they're resorting to this, it means you've got them on the ropes. Don't back down now. It's not worth your safety. Or Mom's." "We've never raised you to surrender when things get tough," Frank said, grimacing as he shifted position. "Your mother and I can take care of ourselves. We'll be more careful, but we're not hiding." Jack left the hospital with his mind in turmoil. If Warren was truly behind the accident, it represented an escalation beyond anything Jack had anticipated. Legal maneuvers and business pressure were one thing. Physical harm was another entirely. He drove directly to his attorney's office, sharing his suspicions about the accident and requesting immediate legal intervention. By evening, a restraining order had been filed against Warren Blackwood, prohibiting contact with Jack or his family. Police reports have been updated to reflect the potential connection between the accident and ongoing legal disputes. Jack spent the night at his parents' home, arranging for additional security measures to be installed the following day. As dawn broke, he made two critical decisions. First, he would provide the testimony Commissioner Hamilton requested about the intellectual property theft. Second, he would accelerate the endgame of his plan, pushing Warren not just to accountability, but to the brink of complete professional ruin. The next morning, Jack met with Roger Tompkins at a coffee shop near the newspaper offices. "I need everything you have on Warren's political connections," Jack said without preamble. Specifically, donations to planning commission members who later approved Blackwood projects. Tompkins raised an eyebrow. "That's radioactive territory. Most of what I have is circumstantial, patterns of donations followed by favorable decisions. Nothing definitive enough to print." "I'm not asking you to print it," Jack clarified. "I'm asking you to share your research with the Attorney General's office. Let them connect the dots officially." "This feels personal now," Tompkins observed. "What changed?" Jack considered how much to reveal. "My father was injured in a car accident yesterday. The driver works for Blackwood Properties." "Jesus," Tompkins looked genuinely shocked. "You think Warren ordered a hit?" "I think Warren believes himself untouchable," Jack replied carefully. "Men like that don't recognize boundaries until they're forced to." The journalist studied him for a long moment. "I'll share what I have with the AG's office." "But Jack, be careful. If Warren's willing to escalate to violence, even indirectly, you're in dangerous territory." "I know exactly where I stand," Jack assured him. "And so will Warren very soon." The final piece fell into place that afternoon when Sophie Valdez provided Jack's attorney with a previously undisclosed recording. Warren Blackwood explicitly instructing Douglas Pierce to reproduce Jack's resort designs with minimal changes to avoid copyright issues. "I was saving it," Sophie admitted during their conference call. "Insurance policy, in case Blackwood came after me personally. But after hearing about your father's accident, someone needs to stop this man." Jack forwarded the recording to Commissioner Hamilton with a brief message. "I'll testify. Schedule it as soon as possible." That evening, as Jack reviewed security footage from the new cameras at his parents' home, his doorbell rang. Standing on his porch, looking haggard and diminished, was Douglas Pierce. "We need to talk," Douglas said, nervously glancing over his shoulder. "Not here. It's not safe." Against his better judgment, Jack agreed to meet at a public park 20 minutes later. He arrived first, choosing a bench with clear sight lines in all directions. Douglas appeared precisely on time, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. "Warren knows I'm meeting you," Douglas said immediately, sitting beside Jack, but keeping his eyes on the surrounding area. "He's having me followed. Why take the risk?" "Because I need protection." Douglas's voice cracked slightly. "The AG's office questioned me for 6 hours yesterday. They have recordings, documents, witness testimony. Warren's going down, and he's trying to set me up as the fall guy." "You were a willing participant," Jack pointed out without sympathy. "I know," Douglas admitted. "I'm not claiming innocence. But Warren's the mastermind. Every decision, every cut corner, every bribe, it all came from him." "What are you offering?" "Everything. Testimony about how Warren orchestrated the theft of your designs. Proof that he directed the falsification of environmental reports. Records of payments to planning officials." Douglas leaned closer. "And confirmation that he ordered the accident involving your father." Jack's composure slipped for the first time. "You have proof of that?" "He didn't put in writing," Douglas said quickly. "But I was there when he made the call. Teach Brennan a lesson through the old man." Those were his exact words. "Why should I believe you now? After everything?" Douglas laughed bitterly. "Self-preservation. Warren's sacrificing me to save himself. The only way I avoid years in prison is with a cooperation agreement, and for that, I need something valuable enough to trade. Like Warren's direct involvement in targeting my father. Exactly. Douglas glanced nervously around the park again. I made a copy of Warren's private business calendar. It shows a meeting with the driver 2 days before the accident. A meeting with no legitimate business purpose. And Marlene? Jack couldn't help asking, where does she stand in all this? Douglas's expression shifted to something almost like pity. She suspected her father was behind the accident. That's what finally broke her loyalty. She's been cooperating with the AG's office for the past week. The revelation hit Jack harder than he expected. Despite everything, part of him had continued to believe Marlene was fully complicit in her father's schemes. Warren doesn't know she's turned on him, Douglas continued. He still thinks she's his loyal daughter, standing by the family at all costs. What do you want from me? Jack asked finally. Put in a word with the prosecutor. Douglas replied immediately. Tell them I came to you voluntarily with crucial information. It could make the difference between a reasonable plea deal and spending the next decade in prison. Jack stood, decision made. I'll consider it, but only after you've testified fully and truthfully about Warren's involvement in my father's accident. As Douglas walked away, Jack felt the weight of the past months pressing down on him. What had begun as a quest for dignity and justice had evolved into something darker, a systematic dismantling of Warren Blackwood's empire and reputation. The question that had been haunting him for weeks resurfaced with new urgency. At what point did justified retribution become destructive vengeance? His phone rang, Nora calling with news that would force him to confront that question sooner than expected. Chapter 7. Perfect Storm. The Attorney General's press conference sent shockwaves through the business community. Standing before a forest of microphones, AG Lydia Cortez outlined charges against Warren Blackwood and 4 Blackwood Properties executives, including Douglas Pierce. Fraud, racketeering, bribery of public officials, falsification of records, intellectual property theft, and, most dramatically, criminal conspiracy related to Frank Brennan's accident. This case represents one of the most comprehensive patterns of corporate malfeasance this office has encountered, Cortez declared, cameras flashing continuously. Mr. Blackwood used his company not simply to build real estate, but to construct a web of corruption that undermined fair competition, endangered public safety, and ultimately led to violence against a private citizen. Jack watched the broadcast from his office, Nora beside him, as Cortez detailed the role of whistleblowers and evidence providers. Jack's name was mentioned specifically as a victim of intellectual property theft who had cooperated with investigators. You've arrived, Nora commented as his phone immediately began buzzing with messages and calls. Public vindication. It doesn't feel like victory, Jack admitted, silencing his phone. It feels like watching a building collapse. A building built on a rotten foundation, she reminded him. Warren Blackwood did this to himself. With my help, Jack added quietly. I laid the charges and lit the fuse. Having second thoughts, Jack considered the question seriously. Not about exposing Warren's corruption, that needed to happen, but about how far I was willing to go, how much this has consumed me since Montana. Justified anger isn't something to apologize for, Norris said, squeezing his shoulder. You stood up to a bully who physically assaulted you, betrayed your trust, and ultimately went after your family. I know, Jack nodded slowly, but there's a fine line between justice and obsession. I've been walking it for months. Their conversation was interrupted by Jack's assistant. Mr. Brennan, Marlene Blackwood is here to see you. Should I send her in? Jack decided after a moment's hesitation. Nora stood to leave. Wanting to stay? No, I think we need to talk alone. Marlene entered looking nothing like either the polished socialite or the angry wife of previous encounters. Dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, she carried herself with a weariness that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. I didn't think you'd see me, she said, remaining standing even when Jack gestured toward a chair. I wasn't sure I would either, he admitted. But here we are. I saw the press conference. Marlene's voice was rough with emotion. Dad's being arraigned tomorrow. His lawyer says he'll likely face significant jail time. I'm sorry it came to this, Jack said, surprised to find he meant it. Despite everything, I know he's still your father. The man they described today, the one who ordered someone to hurt your father. That's not the dad I thought I knew. Tears welled in her eyes. I've been so blind, Jack. So willfully, stupidly blind. When did you figure it out? Jack asked gently. About your father, about the kind of business he really ran? Parts of it, I'd always suspected, Marlene admitted, finally sinking into a chair. The way certain problems would conveniently disappear, how competitors would suddenly abandon projects. But I told myself that's just how business works at that level. And Douglas, she flushed with shame. That was different. Complicated. Was it love? God, no. Marlene laughed bitterly. It was status. Security. Douglas was Dad's chosen successor, the son he never had. Being with him meant staying at the center of Dad's world. Even at the cost of our marriage? I didn't think it would cost that much, she said quietly. I thought you'd never find out. That we could all just continue in our assigned roles. You the talented architect married into the Blackwood family. Me the loyal daughter carrying on the legacy. What changed? Jack studied her face, searching for signs of the woman he'd once loved. Your father's accident, Marlene said without hesitation. When I found out Dad might have been involved, that he'd actually hurt someone to get back at you, something broke inside me. I realized there was no line he wouldn't cross. Jack nodded slowly, processing this. The AG mentioned cooperating witnesses. Douglas claimed you've been helping the investigation. For the past 2 weeks, she confirmed. Dad still doesn't know. He thinks I'm gathering information from his office to help his defense. She paused, visibly struggling with emotion. I recorded conversations, copied files, told investigators where to look for evidence of bribes. That must have been difficult, Jack acknowledged, genuinely moved by her evident pain. It was the only thing I could do, Marlene said simply. The only way to finally choose, right over easy. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history and divergent paths hanging between them. What happens now? Jack finally asked. The divorce finalizes next week, Marlene reminded him. After that, I don't know. Dad's companies will be sold off to pay restitution. The Blackwood name is toxic in this town. I'll probably leave, start over somewhere people don't know me. And Douglas, cutting a deal for what I hear. Limited jail time in exchange for testimony against Dad. Her expression hardened slightly. He turned on Dad even faster than I did. Loyalty was never his strong suit. Jack couldn't help a small, ironic smile. No honor among thieves. Something like that. Marlene stood to leave, then hesitated. For what it's worth, Jack, I am sorry. Not just for the affair or for siding with Dad that day in Montana, but for never really seeing you. For not understanding what actually mattered. Thank you for saying that, Jack replied quietly. I hope you find what you're looking for, Marlene. Truly. After she left, Jack sat alone in his office as dusk settled over the city. The press conference, Marlene's visit, the pending arraignment, all of it should have felt like victory. Instead, he found himself questioning the path he'd chosen and the man he'd become during these months of calculated retribution. His phone rang. His mother calling from the hospital where his father was having a follow-up appointment. How's Dad doing? Jack asked immediately. Better than expected, Rita replied. The doctor says he's healing well, ahead of schedule. That's good news. Jack, his mother's voice softened. We saw the press conference. Your father wants to speak with you. After a rustling sound, Frank's voice came on the line. Son, you there? I'm here, Dad. How are you feeling? Never mind that. Frank dismissed the question. I need to know something. Are you okay with how this is all played out? Jack considered lying, then decided against it. I don't know. I set out to protect myself and my work, to stand up against people who thought they could walk all over me. But somewhere along the way, it became darker. Revenge is like that, his father said sagely. Starts out feeling like justice, ends up feeling like poison. The question is, what do you do now? What do you mean? Warren Blackwood's going to jail, Frank stated flatly. His company's falling apart. His reputation's destroyed. You've won, son. Complete victory. The question is whether you can show mercy in victory. Mercy, Jack repeated, surprised. After what he did to you? Especially after that, Frank insisted. Mercy isn't about whether the other person deserves it. It's about who you choose to be when you have all the power. The conversation stayed with Jack long after they hung up. His father's words echoed as he reviewed the events of recent months, the careful planning, the strategic moves, the systematic dismantling of Warren Blackwood's empire and reputation. He'd achieved everything he set out to do, and more. So why did victory taste so hollow? Chapter 8, Crossroads. The media storm following Warren Blackwood's arraignment exceeded even Jack's expectations. News vans camped outside the courthouse, capturing footage of the once untouchable real estate mogul being led away in handcuffs after being denied bail as a flight risk. Financial news programs ran special segments on the Blackwood empire's collapse, complete with graphics showing the company's plummeting stock price and the domino effect on associated businesses. Jack deliberately avoided public comment, declining all interview requests and instructing his firm's employees to do the same. He focused instead on current projects, throwing himself into work with an intensity that concerned even Nora. "When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" she asked, finding him still at his drafting table well past midnight. "I sleep enough," Jack replied without looking up from his drawings. "The Henderson project deadline isn't for 3 weeks," Nora pointed out. "This obsessive work schedule isn't necessary. It keeps my mind occupied." "From what?" "Celebrating your victory." When Jack didn't respond, she sighed and pulled up a chair. "Talk to me, Jack. You've won. Warren's facing years in prison. Douglas is scrambling to save himself with a plea deal. The divorce is finalizing tomorrow. This should be your moment of vindication." Jack finally set down his pencil. "That's just it. I got everything I wanted. Warren exposed and punished. My reputation and work protected. Even Marlene finally acknowledging her part in it all." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "But it doesn't feel like I thought it would. How did you think it would feel?" "I don't know. Satisfying? Healing? Instead, I feel hollow," Nora supplied. "Because revenge never actually repairs what was broken in the first place." Jack nodded slowly. "My father said something similar. About mercy being a choice you make when you have all the power." Frank Brennan, closet philosopher, Nora smiled. "He's not wrong. So what now? Warren's legal troubles aren't going away no matter what I do. The company is hemorrhaging value. Clients are fleeing. Projects are stalled mid-construction. Hundreds of employees who had nothing to do with Warren's corruption are losing their livelihoods. None of that is your responsibility," Nora reminded him. "Isn't it? I set this in motion. I pursued it relentlessly, even after getting everything I originally wanted." Jack stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. At what point did justified self-defense become something else? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. The following day, Jack attended the final divorce hearing alone. Marlene appeared similarly unaccompanied, both of them choosing to end their marriage without the spectacle of attorneys or family members present. The proceedings were brief, the judge confirming their agreement on all terms before granting the divorce. In the courthouse hallway afterward, they stood awkwardly, 7 years of marriage reduced to a few signatures on legal documents. "So that's it," Marlene said finally. "Clean break." "That's it," Jack agreed. "Where will you go now?" "Seattle, I think. My mother's sister lives there, the only family member who never bought into the Blackwood mythology. She's offered me a place to stay until I figure things out." Marlene hesitated. "What about you? Still planning to focus on sustainable architecture?" "That's the plan," Jack confirmed. "Though I'm considering some pro bono work as well, affordable housing designs, community centers, that sort of thing." "You always wanted to do that," Marlene remembered, a flash of genuine regret crossing her features. "Before I convince you to focus on more profitable projects." "We all make choices," Jack said without accusation. "The important thing is recognizing when we need to make different ones." They parted with a handshake that felt simultaneously too formal and too intimate. The final contact between two people who had once shared everything but had become strangers. Jack spent the afternoon visiting his father, who was recovering at home under Rita's watchful care. Frank looked better than he had in the hospital, color returning to his face and some of his natural vitality evident in his movements despite the lingering pain. "Did the divorce go through?" Frank asked as they sat in the backyard, enjoying rare autumn sunshine. "It's done," Jack confirmed. "Marlene's moving to Seattle to start over." "And how are you feeling about it all?" Jack considered the question carefully. Relieved it's over. Sad about what might have been. Uncertain about what comes next. Normal feelings after the end of a marriage, Frank assured him. Even under these circumstances. "There's more to it," Jack admitted. "I've been thinking about what you said, about mercy being a choice when you have all the power. And I'm trying to figure out what that means practically. Warren's facing criminal charges regardless of what I do. The company is collapsing. People who had nothing to do with his corruption are losing their jobs. Projects are stalled. Communities affected." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like you're seeing the broader impact now, beyond your personal vendetta." "I am," Jack acknowledged. "And I'm wondering if there's something I should do about it." "Like what?" "I don't know yet," Jack said honestly. "But I know I don't want this to be the end of the story. Just destruction and punishment, nothing built from the ashes." His father smiled with evident pride. "Now that sounds like the son we raised." The seed of an idea took root that afternoon, growing clearer as Jack drove back to his office. By evening, he had outlined a concept that felt simultaneously radical and obvious. He called Nora, asking her to meet him first thing in the morning. When she arrived, coffee in hand, Jack was already at the conference table, surrounded by preliminary sketches and legal documents. "You look like you actually slept," she observed, setting a cup in front of him. 6 full hours, Jack confirmed. "And I had a revelation. Should I be worried?" "Not worried. Intrigued." Jack gestured to the materials spread across the table. "What would you say if I told you I'm considering trying to acquire Blackwood Properties' stalled development projects?" Nora nearly choked on her coffee. "I'd say you've lost your mind. Those projects are toxic assets right now, tied up in legal complications, financing in disarray, subcontractors fleeing." "Exactly," Jack nodded. "Which means they'll be available at pennies on the dollar once the bankruptcy proceedings begin. The banks want to recover something rather than nothing. Even at fire sale prices, we don't have that kind of capital," Nora pointed out. "We're a successful architecture firm, not a development company." "We wouldn't do it alone," Jack explained, sliding a document toward her. "I've been researching community development corporations, public-private partnerships, sustainable investment funds. There's a way to structure this that brings in multiple stakeholders, local governments interested in completing projects that would otherwise become urban blight, ethical investors looking for social impact opportunities, community organizations representing the people actually affected by these developments. You want to transform Blackwood's luxury developments into what exactly?" "Mixed use, mixed income, sustainable communities," Jack said, growing animated. "Taking what Warren intended as exclusive enclaves for the wealthy and reimagining them as vibrant neighborhoods that benefit entire communities. Affordable housing alongside market-rate units. Green spaces. Community centers. Local businesses rather than chain stores." Nora studied him carefully. "This isn't just about business, is it? This is your version of mercy." "Maybe," Jack admitted. "Not erasing what Warren did wrong, but creating something positive from the wreckage. Transforming rather than just destroying." "It's ambitious," Nora acknowledged. "Possibly impossible, but worth trying," Jack insisted. "Warren built an empire based on exclusion, corruption, and intimidation. What if we could build something better from its ruins?" Over the following weeks, Jack assembled a team of advisors, legal experts in bankruptcy proceedings, community development specialists, sustainable finance consultants. He reached out to city officials in communities where Blackwood projects stood half-completed, proposing partnerships that would complete the construction while radically reimagining the end result. The responses varied from skeptical interest to enthusiastic support. Local governments, facing the prospect of abandoned construction sites becoming eyesores and safety hazards, were particularly receptive. Community organizations, initially suspicious of Jack's motives, became cautiously supportive, when he invited them to participate in redesigning the projects to serve local needs. As the plan took shape, Jack received an unexpected call from Terrence Hamilton, the real estate commissioner whose investigation had started Warren's downfall. "I've been hearing about your proposal for the Blackwood properties," Hamilton said without preamble. "It's unorthodox, to say the least, but necessary," Jack argued. "These projects will either become community assets or community liabilities. There's no middle ground." "I agree," Hamilton surprised him by saying, "which is why I'd like to meet to discuss how my office might help facilitate the regulatory aspects. If you're serious about this." "Completely serious," Jack confirmed, "and grateful for any support you can provide." The meeting with Hamilton led to others, with banking regulators, zoning officials, affordable housing advocates. The initial concept expanded and evolved, incorporating insights from experts across multiple disciplines. What had begun as Jack's personal project became a collaborative effort involving dozens of stakeholders united by a shared vision of transformation. 6 weeks after Warren's arraignment, as bankruptcy proceedings for Blackwood Properties formally began, Jack presented his comprehensive proposal to the bankruptcy trustee and major creditors. The plan involved creating a new entity, Restoration Community Development, that would acquire select Blackwood projects, refinance them through a combination of private investment and public funding, and complete them according to redesigned plans emphasizing accessibility, sustainability, and community benefit. "This is unorthodox," the lead bankruptcy attorney noted after Jack's presentation. "So was the scale of fraud that created this situation," Jack countered. "Conventional approaches won't address the magnitude of the problem. Your proposal would mean creditors accepting significant write-downs on their loans," a bank representative pointed out, "compared to what they'd recover from abandoned projects tied up in years of litigation. This offers certainty and partial recovery now, plus positive public relations for supporting community redevelopment." The discussion continued for hours, diving into financial details, legal structures, implementation timelines. By the end, while nothing was formally approved, Jack had secured agreement for a more detailed feasibility study and continued consideration of the proposal. As he left the meeting, mentally exhausted but cautiously optimistic, Jack found Nora waiting in the lobby. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "Better than expected," Jack admitted. "They didn't dismiss it outright, which is the first hurdle. Now comes the hard work of proving it can actually succeed." "You look more alive than I've seen you in months," Nora observed as they walked to the parking garage. "This project, it's healing something in you, isn't it?" Jack considered the question thoughtfully. "I think it's helping me redefine victory, moving from tearing down what was wrong to building something better." Speaking of Warren, Nora's tone changed slightly. "Have you heard the latest? He's offering to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence." "Can't say I'm surprised," Jack replied. "Self-preservation seems to be the Blackwood family specialty." "Except for Marlene," Nora pointed out. "From what I hear, she's cooperating without asking for anything in return." Jack nodded, a flicker of respect for his ex-wife's choices warming him unexpectedly. "People can surprise you." "You've certainly surprised me," Nora admitted. 6 months ago, I thought this would end with Warren's destruction, period. I never imagined you trying to salvage something positive from the wreckage." "Neither did I," Jack said honestly. "But at some point I realized there was a choice between being defined by what happened in Montana or defining myself by what I chose to do next." "And you chose the harder path," Nora observed. "The more interesting one," Jack corrected with a small smile. Chapter 9, Reconstruction. 1 year after the Montana incident, Jack stood on the observation platform overlooking what had once been Blackwood Properties' most ambitious luxury development. Riverside Heights, a mixed-use project originally designed as an exclusive enclave for the wealthy. Now, under the direction of Restoration Community Development, it was transforming into something entirely different. Where Warren had planned a private golf course, community gardens, and public green spaces now took shape. The luxury penthouse floors had been redesigned as mixed-income housing, with units reserved for essential workers and families displaced by gentrification. The ground floor retail spaces, once slated for high-end boutiques, were being configured for local businesses, a community health clinic, and educational facilities. Impressive progress, observed Mayor Wallace, who had joined Jack for the site visit. Hard to believe this project was a half-abandoned construction site a year ago. We've had extraordinary cooperation from the city, Jack acknowledged. The expedited permitting process made all the difference. Self-interest, the mayor admitted candidly. Having this property sit derelict would have been a disaster for the surrounding neighborhoods. Your proposal offered a solution that addressed multiple needs simultaneously. They descended from the platform to tour the construction areas, where crews worked steadily to implement the revised designs. Jack greeted workers by name, having made a point of knowing the people bringing his vision to reality. The first residential units will be ready for occupancy next month, Jack explained as they walked. We're prioritizing families displaced by the original development for the first phase of affordable units. Poetic justice, the mayor commented. People pushed out by Blackwood's project, now finding homes in its reimagined version. Jack nodded, thinking about how far things had come a year. Restoration Community Development had successfully acquired 3 of Blackwood's stalled projects, with negotiations advancing on 2 more. The innovative financing model, combining traditional investment, social impact funds, and public partnerships, had attracted national attention as a potential template for similar projects elsewhere. Warren Blackwood had ultimately accepted a plea agreement, receiving a 15-year sentence for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy charges related to Frank Brennan's accident. Douglas Pierce, after extensive cooperation with prosecutors, was serving a 5-year term. The Blackwood corporate empire had been dismantled through bankruptcy proceedings and regulatory actions, its assets sold to satisfy creditors and legal claims. After the mayor departed, Jack continued walking the site alone, making notes on construction progress and design adjustments. His phone rang. Nora calling from their office downtown. "How's the site visit going?" she asked when he answered. "On schedule for once," Jack replied with satisfaction. The East Residential Tower is nearly complete, commercial spaces taking shape nicely. Good timing. The Westridge Community Group is in our office now, reviewing the preliminary designs for their neighborhood project. They're enthusiastic, but have some concerns about the community center location. "Tell them I'll be there in an hour to discuss alternatives," Jack promised. Their input is essential to getting this right. After ending the call, Jack made his way to a quieter section of the site, an area being developed as a memorial garden dedicated to victims of corporate fraud and exploitation. The space had been Marlene's suggestion, offered during one of their infrequent but increasingly amicable conversations. She had surprised him repeatedly over the past year. After moving to Seattle, she had begun working with consumer protection advocates, using her insider knowledge of real estate development to help identify potential fraud and predatory practices. They spoke every few months, not as friends exactly, but as 2 people connected by history and shared understanding of a painful chapter now behind them. Jack's parents had recovered fully, both physically and emotionally, from the trauma of the accident. Frank had become an unexpected advisor to Restoration Community Development, his practical wisdom and ethical clarity providing guidance during complicated decisions. Rita had organized a support network for families displaced by development projects, helping them navigate the system to secure housing in the reimagined communities. As Jack prepared to leave the construction site, a familiar figure approached from the parking area, Sophie Valdez, the whistleblower whose testimony had been crucial in exposing Warren's corruption. Now she served as community liaison for restoration, ensuring transparency and accountability in all aspects of the redevelopment process. "Just the person I wanted to see," she called as she approached. "The Resident Advisory Committee has some suggestions for the rooftop spaces in Building C." "Let me guess," Jack smiled. "More garden plots, fewer lounge areas?" "You're learning," Sophie confirmed with approval. "They're passionate about food security and teaching kids where food comes from." "Make it happen," Jack decided immediately. The design should reflect their priorities, not our assumptions. They walked together toward the parking area, discussing implementation details. As they reached Jack's car, Sophie hesitated. "I got a letter from Warren yesterday," she said quietly. "From prison." Jack stiffened slightly. What did he want? To apologize, supposedly. Her expression revealed deep skepticism. He claims he's had a spiritual awakening behind bars, seeing the error of his ways. Do you believe him? Sophie considered the question seriously. "I believe prison has humbled him. Whether that's genuine remorse or just adjustment to his new reality, that's harder to determine." Jack nodded, understanding her uncertainty. He had received a similar letter 6 months earlier. Pages of Warren's explanation and apology written in careful handwriting so unlike his formerly bold signature. Jack had read it twice, then filed it away without response, still unsure how to process the apparent transformation of a man who had once seemed incapable of admitting wrongdoing. "What did you do with your letter?" Sophie asked. "Kept it," Jack admitted. "Someday, I might know what to do with it." "Not yet. That's where I am too," she agreed. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. After Sophie departed, Jack sat in his car for a moment, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The man who had fled Montana burning with humiliation and rage seemed like a different person now, someone he recognized but no longer fully inhabited. The work of transformation, both of Blackwood's failed projects and of himself, had altered him in ways he was still discovering. His phone rang again, a call from Frank Brennan. "Hey, Dad. Everything okay?" "Better than okay," Frank replied enthusiastically. "The Community Center Committee approved your latest designs unanimously. They're particularly excited about the workshop spaces for teaching practical skills." "That was your suggestion," Jack reminded him. The idea of creating spaces where retired tradespeople could teach younger generations. "Just building bridges between people who need each other," Frank said modestly. "Speaking of which, your mother wanted me to remind you about dinner Sunday. She's making your favorite pot roast." "Wouldn't miss it," Jack promised. After ending the call, he started the drive back to his office, mind already shifting to the afternoon's meetings and design reviews. Traffic slowed as he passed another former Blackwood property, this one not yet acquired by restoration, but still standing abandoned, its partially completed structure a reminder of work yet to be done. Jack made a mental note to revisit the feasibility studies for that site. One project at a time, one building at a time, one community at a time. The work of reconstruction continued, more challenging but ultimately more fulfilling than the work of retribution had ever been. The final meeting of the day ran longer than expected, with community representatives passionately advocating for specific features in the Westridge project. Jack listened more than he spoke, having learned that the best solutions emerged when those most affected by the outcome had the strongest voice in the process. By the time he left the office, evening had settled over the city. He drove home to his modest house in a mixed-income neighborhood, a deliberate choice after selling the larger home he'd shared with Marlene. The smaller space suited his simpler lifestyle now, focused more on work that mattered than on status or appearances. As Jack unlocked his front door, he noticed an envelope that had been slipped underneath. Inside was a newspaper clipping, a profile of restoration community development from a national business magazine, highlighting the innovative model as a potential template for addressing abandoned development projects nationwide. A yellow sticky note was attached with a simple message in Marlene's handwriting. "You found a better way. I'm proud of what you're building." Jack placed the clipping on his desk, next to the architectural awards his firm had received for sustainable design and community impact. The professional recognition mattered, but the simple acknowledgement from someone who had witnessed both his lowest moment and his deliberate choice to rise differently carried its own significance. Later that evening, as Jack reviewed plans for the next day's site meeting, he found himself reflecting on the journey from that mountainside in Montana to the present. The humiliation had been real, the betrayal painful, the anger justified. But the path forward had been his choice. At each crossroads, with each decision, shaping not just buildings and communities, but his own character and legacy. Warren had slapped him and demanded he clean expensive shoes. Marlene had told him to apologize for an accident. The old wounds had healed not through revenge, but through the harder, more rewarding work of creating something valuable from the wreckage. Jack closed his design portfolio and walked to the window, looking out at the city where his reimagined projects were gradually taking shape. The work was far from complete, both the physical construction and his own internal reconstruction. But for the first time since Montana, he felt fully confident in the direction of both. The price of dignity had been high, but its value was proving immeasurable. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.